Folks, we're back. This is Stephanie Phillips and Freight and Friends. He's filling in for Steve today for another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today we have Luke McCarthy. He is a candidate for City of Las Vegas Ward 2, City Council Ward 2. But before we get to Luke, Frank,
yes,
do you have a rant? I know you do.
I got a couple. One, let's legalize mutual combat and start bringing back chivalrous, manly men who can stop these cowardly men from devastating neighborhoods and people. And secondly, if you're looking into somebody or something for the criming or the frauding and they tell you, hey, stop looking, you're probably going to find something there. So pay attention to that stuff, guys.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it today.
So a couple of, we'll get there in just a second, but a couple of announcements, guys. The book signing, How to Navigate Nevada's Family Court System, written by Steve Sanson. We're doing the book signing on Saturday, February 22nd.
Yep. And
it's from 3:30 to 5. It's at West Las Vegas Library. It's 951 Westlake Mead. So come on down and join us. Get your autographed copy. And you can get a copy on Amazon as well. It's $14.99, or you can get one at the event. We have an event page on Facebook, so look that up for all the details. And if you see us looking up here, we announced this last week, we have a monitor now that we can watch comments, questions, and the live feed on Facebook. So that's what we're looking at. So if you want to comment or ask a question, feel free. And the other thing too, we have sponsorship spots available. If you would like to advertise on the Veterans in Politics talk show, we have space available for yard sign size for all of our candidates, for anybody with a business, nonprofit, anything you want to advertise. So we've got 4, 5, 6 different spots. And if you'd like to know more about that, get in touch with Steve or myself.
And speaking of that, Blexit is sponsoring the book signing.
And thank you, Frank. And thank you, Blexit. Yes, they are sponsoring the book signing, and we are excited to have them. They're going to be down there as well. So come on down and you can talk with them, and it'll be great.
Be a good event. That neighborhood definitely needs to start combating family court issues.
Yeah, and a lot of people represent themselves. In fact, I was just talking to a litigant today. And she can't afford an attorney. And most of the litigants represent themselves. So this book is a self-help book. So if you do not have an attorney and can't afford one, and you're going through family court and divorce and all of this, this is the book for you. There's all the forms and all the help that you would possibly need to get through that system. But anyway, we're here to talk to Luke McCarthy. So
thanks, Stephanie. How are you?
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us about yourself.
Born in Chicago to Irish parents. I have dual citizenship with Ireland.
Okay.
Spent a very short time in Chicago. I don't remember it. Parents moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. My younger brother was born. And then ended up in Connecticut.
Oh, wow. What part?
Fairfield.
Oh, I was
Fairfield
born
County.
in Connecticut.
Where were you born?
Danbury.
Oh, were you really?
Uh-huh.
So Danbury is a little north. And if you go down towards the coast, you'll hit Fairfield and Westport and Southport. Right in that neck of the woods.
Very pretty back there.
Yeah, it is very pretty.
Yeah.
How old were you when you left?
A baby. So just like you out of Chicago. I don't remember anything.
Loved Connecticut growing up. Too cold for me.
Yeah.
Much too cold.
Mm-hmm.
A little too wet.
Yep. Big mosquitoes.
Yep.
All that. So how did you end up in Las Vegas?
Went to college in Connecticut, a small liberal arts school named Trinity, after going to a phenomenal high school named Fairfield Prep, which was Jesuit. My father was a BC High graduate. My aunt was the first female graduate of Fordham at their main campus. They had separated women to a satellite campus. They combined them at their main campus, and her maiden name was Daly. There were other women in her class, but having a maiden name with D, she was earlier in the alphabet than her classmates, and she was the first female graduate of Fordham. My mom was at their main campus, and not the first ever, but at their main campus. As you know, most colleges were segregated in the 50s and 60s, et cetera. My mother's a graduate of the University of San Francisco. She grew up in New York. Dad grew up in Boston. Separately, they ended up in California. My dad was an accountant working for Price Waterhouse, and a couple of guys knew a couple of nurses and invited him to a party. And two Irish kids from back east met at a party and ended up getting married. And my mom was a nurse, and whenever my dad took a job moving progressively east back to New York, my mother would get a job as a nurse.
Oh.
And work in the emergency room or wherever. My younger sister was born. I was about 10. She stopped working, took about 10 years off. We would go to the bus every day on our own, kind of latchkey kids for a little bit. I went to an all-boys high school. Like I said, I would hitchhike home, something you never see now.
Can't do that now.
Can't do
but
that
back
now.
in the day.
Isn't it all Uber is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Getting in a ride with a stranger.
Yeah.
that's a very good point.
You just pay. It was free back then.
Right.
Now you pay.
But free with the chance of possible serial killer.
Possible,
never,
but
never.
most likely not.
No, most likely not. So, went to a small liberal arts college in Connecticut. I was a swimmer and a rower and played water polo. I was really into sports. I was president of my class in high school, active in politics. I grew up across the street from a United States senator.
Wow.
His son was a couple years older than me, went to the same high school. And then after college, I tried out for the U.S. national team in rowing, made a pre-elite squad, like a minor league. And since I was a little kid, I'd always wanted to be a firefighter. So I first became a school teacher. I then went through a training program with Brooks Brothers, men's clothing, which I thought was phenomenal. And the Olympics were taking place in Atlanta. And I had a bunch of friends on the team, went down to Atlanta. And since I was a kid, wanted to be a firefighter. And I knew in my late 20s, if I didn't try it, I most likely never would do it. Mm-hmm. Was a firefighter in Georgia for 3 years. Met a very pretty girl at an Olympic volleyball test event. And she became my wife. And we ended up moving to D.C. She helped run George W. Bush's campaign for president in the state of Georgia.
Wow.
And she worked for President G.W., senior executive staff, for just shy of 5 years. In the intervening time, her mother had moved to Vegas. My brother-in-law, he's now deceased, was a professional card player. And he would work the casinos every night. It's a very, very difficult. You have to put in an enormous amount of time and effort. It is not what you think it is from watching the movies and television. You have to sit at a table and play. And he was very good at it. He's deceased. Moved out here. Mother-in-law was sick. She had MS. And we came out to take care of her. I had one daughter when we were in D.C., a second daughter born here. I ended up divorced from my first wife. 2 daughters, now one is in college at Virginia Tech, and the other is a junior at West Tech. She was an all-state swimmer. She's my pride and joy. Both of them are my pride and joy. I'm a little closer with the younger one. She was a swimmer, faster than her dad, which I love. Yeah.
There you go.
I always tell her that.
Taught her well.
Well, I always say to her, most guys want a son. I didn't want a son. I wanted a breaststroker, and I got a backstroker instead. So she laughs at that.
That's close.
Yeah, it was
Right.
close. It was close.
Can't be everything you want.
She's in the Nevada Youth Legislature. So there's 21
Nice.
students across the state who are in the Nevada. You probably, from the general public, think of it as the Nevada State Senate for the youth. It's just, they call it the Youth Legislature. And she is actually presenting her own bill in March up at the Nevada Legislature.
Nice. What's that going to be?
It's a great bill. She lost a very good friend to a fentanyl overdose.
That's terrible.
It's terrible. I'm not going to say her name, but she ended up trading her body at a very young age for drugs.
Wow.
Happens a lot.
It does happen far too often. And kudos, I will say this to Steve Wolfson. He got the guy and put him behind bars.
Good.
Kudos to Steve Wolfson. And this little girl got a drug. I don't know what she thought it was. It was laced with something much more powerful. And she overdosed one morning.
We have heard that so much, many young
that's
people.
That's how it's happening. It's like they go to get their normal drug, but they put the fentanyl in it because so cheap and gives you such a higher high, but just that much more than what's necessary, you're done.
That's so unfortunate. Well, good for her for doing that.
Yeah, and it would
awesome.
it would establish a minimum threshold if it's passed.
Good.
For what to do with students who are suspected of being high on drugs at school. Because right now there's a lot of variance. There's how you handle it may be principal dependent, it may be dependent based on the county, the school board. So it would direct, if it's passed, the Nevada System of Higher Education to come up with a kind of, the Nevada State Board of Education to come up with a minimum threshold on a protocol on what you as a principal should do and you as a principal should do and what you would do in Washoe County and you would do here in Clark County, et cetera. So I'm really proud of that kid. The older one's an architecture student at Virginia Tech, super great kid. Both of them are nerds. Nerds rule the world right now.
Yes,
smart.
they do.
Great.
They are wonderful kids, and Dad couldn't be prouder. I am now married to my Starbucks barista.
Aw.
Ward 2 is Summerlin, essentially, and I met her at a coffee shop and took the chance and gave her my card and
The rest is
couldn't be
history.
happy. Yeah. She called me. She texted me 4 days later. Where have you been? And I said, I've been in the store. I haven't seen you. And we ended up going out for St. Patrick's Day 8 years ago. And on the very first date, she said, I'm moving to Chicago.
Oh boy.
And I
You
said,
talked her
really?
out of that, huh?
No, I didn't. I ended up driving her out there, and she spent 13 months in Chicago, and then I flew back out and drove her back here,
Oh my goodness.
and got elected. Got engaged to her on election day in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
November.
So Ward 2 holds some memories for you, huh?
Yeah, Ward 2 has been good
So
to me.
that's special.
Yeah.
And then how long have you been a firefighter?
I've been a firefighter since the very first Monday of 1999,
Okay.
but I started in Georgia. I was a firefighter. My first chief was a guy named Ken Burris. He ended up running the National Fire Academy, which would be the equivalent of Quantico for the FBI or the National, Police Academy. It's out of Emmitsburg, Maryland. I was the last firefighter he hired, and I was in a rookie school in 1999. Bunch of guys there. Left that department and went to a different department in Georgia. They offered to pay for some advanced EMS training. And then my fiance, former wife, took the job at the Bush administration, so we moved to Northern Virginia, and I became a firefighter with Arlington County, home of the Pentagon. I was in DC on 9/11. I was not on duty. I was actually registering my car.
Wow.
I was smog checking it and registering the car. I'll never forget the young kid at the line. He was like, something's happened. A plane went down in New York, and he's helping me out. And it took a long time. It was just, the DMV was a little slow that day.
That day.
And he said, I think a second plane's hit. And then we saw the plume of smoke coming up from the Pentagon area. We didn't know what it was.
Right.
And then I ended up driving home. I was living in DC at the time, and all the police were out. And they were very panicked, obviously, because we didn't know what was happening. And couldn't get in touch with my wife. She ended up walking home from the Department of Labor where she worked. And we all know 9/11, and that was my old department. I was not with the department at the time. I was in the very first rookie school after 9/11. I'll never forget, the fire chief, Jim Schwartz, walked in, and he said very graciously, ladies and gentlemen, and we had a co-education class. There's not a lot of women in the fire service. There were 2 in that class. He said, if any of you want to leave, I totally understand, because the American fire service has changed dramatically in the past 30 days. And no one did. Not everybody graduated. Some of the folks didn't make it. And I worked there for just shy of 5 years. And then I said earlier that my former mother-in-law, her health, she's now also deceased, was really trending downward, and we needed to be here. And we came out, and I went through rookie school here in 2006. And I've been a firefighter ever since.
Wow.
Never taken a promotional exam. Very active in the union, which is how we met, and how I met Steve. very active in the courts and the judicial interview process. I know you mentioned earlier divorce. Over 90% of firefighters end up divorced. It's a very stressful job. You're gone a lot. You come home very tired and very cranky. You see a lot. And it does take a toll on marriages, which is why we are very careful in who we pick for judges. And we want good people in office. And
that's for sure.
Yeah.
it's very important.
You got to vet
You've
them.
always been politically involved then, it sounds like.
I have. I grew up in a household. My mother was a liberal Democrat. My father was a Republican. He likes to joke that he voted for Kennedy, the only Democrat he ever voted for. I said, why? He said he was Irish and I was young. And, but politics was always something we talked about at the kitchen table. My parents, like I said, my father grew up in Massachusetts. It was a hotbed of politics. My mother in New York, 2 Irish immigrants off the boat. And when you grow up hearing Gaelic, which is what we call it, the Irish will call it the Irish language, you understand the immigrant experience. Not to the same extent that I think is going on today, because there's a language barrier that's much more entrenched in today's, Hispanic, Indian Americans coming over. My grandparents were very lucky. They spoke English with a thick Irish brogue, but they were able to transition much easier into the American culture. My grandfather was a fireman. I am a firefighter. It's actually a different job. Most people don't know that.
Yeah, explain that.
A fireman is someone who puts coals in the back of a train to keep a locomotive going.
Okay.
And years ago, especially back east, not really here in Vegas, the way they kept buildings warm was with steam boilers. And you would have to stoke the coals of a steam boiler. And they would also keep pumps moving in water systems in New York and in Boston and most major metropolitan areas. To keep the water moving through the pipes, you need a pump, and they would stoke the coals. And these pumps would blow up. And the Hartford Steam Boiler Insurance Company on 1 State Street in Hartford was one of the first insurance companies in the United States of America. And they said, we have a series of best practices. And if you as a building adopt our best practices and you let us come in and audit and double check and look at the certifications and you pass, we will insure your building against catastrophic loss, because they would blow up. And both of my grandparents were firemen, one for the city of Boston and one for the city of New York.
Wow. So speaking of fires, and we were talking about the California fires.
We were talking before the show began.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us what you think of all of that situation over there and what the LA mayor did and them defunding the firefighters and
no deforestation.
No water and not managing the forest and the reservoir being empty. And I mean, all of these things that we have found out since.
It's very unique when you have all those predictable but also preventable scenarios line up in such a way that it causes a massive fire. But it's happened before in this country. San Francisco burned down over 100 years ago. Chicago's burned down. LA burned down. Several years ago in Colorado, whole neighborhoods of tract homes have burned down. I brought with me an article out of the paper from January 8th of this year, forecast for up to 60 miles an hour. Now it failed, but they still had, where does it say here, 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Peak wind gusts.
Yeah.
Well, at 40 miles an hour, if you think about it, let's just say a car catches on fire underneath a dead tree. And there's a lot of dead trees because of lack of water. We're in the second longest drought, I believe, right now.
Yeah.
I heard on the radio recently. If those embers get into the canopy of the tree,
Yeah, it's done.
and you have 40 mile an hour gusts, that fire is going to start jumping several miles every few minutes. And the question becomes, do you have enough fire protection? It's an interesting question.
Yes.
You also have to have a lot more undercutting of growth.
Yeah.
We as a nation have been victimized by such aggressive wildland firefighting that where things would burn. The Native Americans really did. They understood you don't live on the land, you live with the land, which I think is a much more prudent way of looking at resources. And when you live with the land, you realize that proper management of the land, of burn policies, is prudent. We're going to have to change the way we do tactics in this country. We're going to have to clear a lot more brush. We have the opportunity now in the Palisades really completely to rebuild, and we're going to need different building codes.
What about different building materials?
Certainly, concrete is one that doesn't burn. At the same time, it's not a great insulator.
What about hemp?
You were talking about that before the show. Why don't you share what you were saying?
So hemp can be harvested every 6 months. So instead of waiting 5-6 years for the trees to grow, you can harvest hemp every 6 months. You can make board out of it, 2x4, 2x6. You can make sheetrock out of it. And all of it, the sheetrock is more R-valued. It's more fire retardant. You know what I mean? So, and it's sturdier. But nowhere wants to grow hemp. No one wants to use it. No one wants to do it. But it's a better fire retardant material. It's a better R value, which is like your home's energy value and insulation value. So your power bill and your air conditioning bill goes down, and it's less likely to catch fire. And if it does catch fire, it doesn't just go, it takes a minute for it to work its way down the sheet. So it gives the firefighters a better chance to get there and fight.
I'm not familiar with it as a product.
Yeah.
I do the suppression side, not the prevention side. So prevention and suppression here in Nevada are, I don't want to say separate, but you don't go to the same rookie school. So people who are in prevention, we like to say they're flying a desk. They go around doing building inspections. They test the sprinkler systems. They're approving codes, et cetera, et cetera. You call me if there's a problem with a fire. They are preventing it from ever catching on fire. I also do, obviously, do EMS. A lot of folks don't know that fire will do EMS, car wrecks, heart attacks, delivered babies, swiftwater rescue, high angle rescue, low angle rescue, hazardous materials.
Could you tell the people just like how important it is to simply get and learn how to use a tourniquet and just keep one in your car?
You know, it's interesting. Police now carry tourniquets.
Oh, I carry 3. I got 1 in my bag, 2 in my car.
They carry them
all times.
At all times. We have them in all of our bags. It can be a very, when I started out in the fire service, if you put on a tourniquet, you were taught that limb was probably going to be lost. Not so much. You can put on a tourniquet for a while, leave it on, stop the bleed, and then the patient goes to the hospital. You can save their lives. We carry them in bags. We have several. And then there are mass casualty units that have even more on there in the event of a mass shooting like we had on October 1.
That was terrible. So you're running for City of Las Vegas, City Council, Ward 2.
Ward 2, which is Summerlin.
What are the boundaries of
So
Ward 2?
We're at Lake Mead.
Okay.
It goes all the way over to basically all west as far as you're going to go across the 215. And it'll go south down towards, there's Wallapai, Desert Inn. There's a small section in Sahara. It's basically Summerlin is the easy way to say it.
So right now, Victoria Seaman sits in that seat, and I've heard that she is going to be hopping over to County Commission, District F. I've heard she's running for CD3 or possibly something else. So do you know that she's not going to be in the seat anymore?
Well, I think that's a question for Victoria. And I think the voters should
That's
still
a very good politician.
It is. And the voters deserve a choice. Victoria's always been very nice to me, so I will let Victoria make that.
So what would you bring to Ward 2 with not only your firefighter experience, but you said you grew up political as well. What are some things you're seeing? Because I mean, every time I hear Ward 2, all I hear about is this Badlands deal or whatever it's called.
Kudos to the mayor, Shelley Berkeley, who's really brought that Badlands to a close right now.
Yeah, we wanted to ask you about that, what the current status is. And
I think it looks like Shelley has, from what I've read in the newspaper, she's done a very good job. And my hat is off to her. I think the voters made an excellent choice electing her mayor.
So they're going to build stuff there now?
I think they're going to build there now, yeah.
Do you know what they're going to build?
I don't know what they're going to build there now.
Well, with the knowledge I just gave you, would you guys looking to be building with more futuristic stuff like hemp or graphene or other materials like that?
Well, it's obvious up to the builder what he chooses. We can't require somebody in the fire department to build with a certain material. I couldn't make somebody.
But as a city councilman, couldn't you?
I don't know if the city council has the authority legally to mandate a certain.
that'd be a code.
I don't say mandate, but like kind of promote it or like, hey,
I can say
we would like this or we would like. My other question is like, what are we going to do with those jobs when they get here? Are we going to try and make it to where 60% of the contract is local builders, so we save some money on not paying per diems for companies coming out of state, things like that? What are some other things you're looking to do with that?
So I'll address a couple of simple things. I will talk about roofs really quick. Mm-hmm. You'll see in older parts of Vegas a wood shake roof. Those are not allowed anymore.
Yeah.
So you do have some ability to mandate building materials.
What about the new roof shingles they have now that are solar? They're still the shingles.
Yeah, they're
but now they're solar. So
I've
the
seen
whole roof
those,
becomes solar.
And I don't know if the city council can mandate that you put in those type of roof shingles. I simply don't know. I do know you can use a tile. You can use metal roofs. Again, that's the builder is going to make those decisions. I do want to talk about contractors. I do think out-of-state contractors is a problem. If elected, I would be very judicious that we would be building things with project labor agreements, with union labor, with good jobs. I can use the Durango Hotel and Casino. They just opened up. Phenomenal new place. Mm-hmm. Not in my district, but it is phenomenal. Wonderful place. It's going to employ thousands of workers. We need housing. It's one of the biggest problems here in Las Vegas. If you go to a cocktail party, if you talk to people down at the city, if you talk to people down at Clark County, we need somewhere between 80 and 100,000 new housing units. We need housing. So I don't know what they're going to build. I don't know how many units they're going to build. I would certainly encourage them to build as many as they possibly could. I think you're going to have to look at lot size. You're going to have to look at height. You're going to have to look at density, you're going to have to look at parking, all those things come into play. But I do think it's very important that we as a society put pressure on the federal government because, as you both know, the majority of land in this state is owned by the federal government.
Over 70%, Bureau of Land Management.
He just asked,
he did.
Wasn't that today?
A day or two ago, he said,
asked
all the legislators to, kudos to Joe.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a phenomenal, I've known him for years as a sheriff. I think he's doing a very good job as governor. Mm-hmm. I think Kevin's doing a great job as sheriff now, but he is right. We need federal land opened up so that we can build.
Well, with that building of the family crisis that you have right now, what I've noticed and I think we should do is, one, I think we should start actually building family homes. Not 2 bedrooms, not 3 bedrooms, but 4 and 5 bedrooms for actual families to be like, that's it. This is your family home. This is where it's at. And also look into, instead of going 2 stories up, why don't we go 1 story down, 1 story up? They still get a 2-story home, but then underneath, you're getting to use the ground as insulation. You're getting to keep the ground area cooler, and then upstairs, you could have your garage, the family room, other things like that. Why aren't we looking at anything like that?
So I think that's an interesting thing. I talked to a professor at Boston University who does a lot of architecture and land use, and you're correct. If you build down, mm-hmm. the ground will be somewhere around 50 degrees.
Yes, sir.
So you're only warming it up or cooling it off 20 degrees. You'll get to 70 pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The problem is your windows will now be at ground level. Mm-hmm. So think about that. If you're in the basement mm-hmm. and you're walking around and you look out a window, you're looking out at ground level. That's going to take a change in society to adopt that from a visual perspective.
Would you still have? You'll still have your upstairs too.
I do think you'll still have your upstairs. I also think you can go more than just 2 stories. You can go 3 stories. You could go 4 stories. You can go 5. You can have apartment complexes. You can have a lot more mixed use. You know, back east, we have a lot more mixed use. You're starting to see it now over on Rainbow in the 215. There's a lot of mixed use where they have back east in this fireman, we call them taxpayers, where you would put a commercial building on the bottom, and you saw they're all over the East Coast.
Oh, they're doing that with the
Living
15-minute
on top.
cities now.
And I think it's phenomenal too, because you're gonna have more younger kids living in them, meeting one another, going to the coffee shops. I mean, I have a daughter who's 21 and a daughter who's 17, and they're going to be living in those communities in the next 5 to 10 years of their lives. And if they're living only in single family housing, there's not enough density for them to meet people. I can use this as a great example. If you swim for the Boulder City High School swim team, that's one of the best swim teams around. It's phenomenal. They've produced many Olympians. If you swim for them and you letter, there's a really good chance you're going to swim in college. And after college, if you want to come home and go move to Boulder City, there are no homes available for under $500,000. Now, there's a couple of trailer parks, but younger kids don't want to live in that type of environment. Now, I think there's a place for that. Certainly in storm-ridden Florida, you want to live on the coast. You don't want to build a house that's going to get destroyed. You want to live in something that can be replaced if it's damaged. There's not enough housing. We need a lot more housing. I'll use
So
Connecticut.
you
as an
think
example.
that is the biggest
I think that's a
problem
big
facing
one.
Ward
I think-
2? What else facing Ward 2?
I
you
think
think?
you'd like to see a lot of people break up the school district.
God, please, yes.
I think there's a lot of people who
I've
are,
heard that a lot.
I've heard that too. I think that's going to take some changes legislatively. I don't think it's something the city council can just do. That's not legal. You can be part of the conversation. I do think the orange traffic cone, when I talk
You mean
to
the state
people,
flower?
Yeah.
you can see by
You get
just
the baby
bringing up
ones
with
and the
both
big
of
ones
you,
that grow. They're beautiful.
that's a problem.
It is a huge problem.
I would also like to see police, fire, public safety get more funding. I am nervous that what took place in California in a roundabout way could take here with the wildfires. Lee Canyon and Kyle Canyon could burn. It did several years ago. We as a society got very lucky. The wind was blowing out of the valley. If all of that wind had been blowing in the valley, the hospital surge 2 to 3 days later with all that smoke relative to asthma
The smoke inhalation.
Overseas.
Yeah.
would have inundated the hospitals. So I really do think those are some of the salient issues facing not only Ward 2, but the entire city.
How much more funding do you think the Metro needs? And
That's a great
Firefighters
question for
need-
Kevin. I'm sure he would take as much as he possibly could. We are
that, Kevin?
understaffed. We are understaffed when you look at national metrics, fire is, police is, and the court systems is. I mean, the court system, the caseload that judges have, as much as we may not like family court from time to time, but they are overworked.
Speaking of the courts, when there's a vacancy and the city has to appoint a judge, which they just got done doing, there wasn't any written policy procedures in how they go about selecting that person.
Well, there's the Judicial Selection Committee.
That's for Nevada. I've been there several times, but the city council didn't have anything in there's no policy procedures written. So what do you think that should look like? If
I
you're
didn't realize there's...
If you're familiar with the Judicial Selection Commission, then what should the city council, what should they have?
Well, if they're not following the city Judicial Selection Committee at all, is what you're saying.
No, they were just talking
They
about...
picked 3 people and then voted one guy in.
I mean, when they had applicants apply for the vacancy,
And that typically goes to the Judicial Selection Committee.
they did not, well, this goes to the city council. This was,
It's my understanding that Judicial Selection Committee vets all of the applicants, and then they pick 3 to go to the city.
this was for municipal court seat, I believe. Steve, weigh in.
Right.
He's up there. But the thing is that they are the ones, they were acting like the Judicial Selection Commission, the city council's appointing this open seat, and there wasn't anything in place. And I was surprised that when all the applicants applied, there were 8, 9, 10 of them, the city didn't post it like the Judicial Selection Commission does. They didn't post it. They didn't make it public. The public wasn't involved in any of the interview process. There was no public comment.
I am not familiar with that example.
Familiarize yourself with.
I just don't think it's
this.
appropriate for me to comment on something I'm not familiar with. You understand that.
December 4th was the city council meeting where they were talking and discussing this. And then Steve and I went back to the last council meeting last week and suggested the same policy and procedure as the Judicial Selection Commission, because they don't have anything in place, but hopefully they do at some point. And if you're elected, then this is something that you're going to have to handle.
Yes, and I'm a little stunned that there was. I don't have all the facts. I don't know about it. I'm not saying your narrative is incorrect. Please don't think that. There's always more to a story. There always is, and that would be something I would take very seriously. The selection of a judge.
Yeah.
Having gone through a divorce myself, having gone into the court system on different arson fires, it was a famous arson fire just a few years ago here in Vegas. The inspections weren't done quite right. And the court system is very, very traumatic for folks.
It is. It's really important.
It's a very important thing. It's especially in municipal court, like you said, in family court, when people don't have lawyers to represent themselves. You're dealing with people on some of their worst days, their most difficult times. Something you see in the fire service. People don't dial 911 when they're throwing a party.
Not when it's not a good day.
It's not a good day. No. It's their worst day, and it may not be a true emergency. I don't want people who are watching to think I'm being trite, but when you've been in the fire service for more than 25 years, you realize the difference between an emergency and an inconvenience. And something may seem like an emergency, and it might not really be. Even a simple car accident, which really isn't an accident, it's a traffic collision. Right? Accident means something that is completely preventable. Most car accidents are preventable. And the way these young kids, and they're mostly kids designing these cars out of Detroit now, these engineers, you're fine in a car accident. If you're not speeding and not on your phone, and you're in a small fender bender, you're going to be fine. And I think I'm not being trite when I say this, but I think a lot of NFL football players after the Super Bowl are much more damaged than a lot of the car accidents you end up going to, just because of airbags and technology and safety and driver assistance and seat belts. And so people dial 911, they've been in a car accident. It's a very traumatic experience emotionally, but most people don't have severe trauma as a result of the accident.
No, a lot of people just looking for that check. That's my opinion, because I've seen that, what you're talking about, like just two people, just a little bumper, and now they got to get the police out there. And
they do, and that's important.
One talks about their neck hurts.
And some of them do, that's very true.
I was like, yeah, but not at no 10 miles an hour sitting there and you got tapped on the back. Your neck ain't hurting.
Yeah.
Now, when you get tagged, like some people we know have been tagged from the side, now you're going to be hurting. Steve got in that car accident recently.
He did.
Yeah, he got T-boned. Dude blew a red light. Stop sign.
No, the guy he didn't see him coming. The guy turned left right in front of him, and he just...
Yeah, but that guy had a stop sign, failure to yield to oncoming traffic.
No, there was no stop sign there.
Oh, the picture Steve saw me, there was a stop sign.
No, that's on the other side of the street. They were both, coming the opposite direction. The guy just turned, and he tried to avoid him. Yeah, he couldn't. But the city has no policy in place to fill vacancies for it's muni court judges. They make $210,000 yearly. Speaking of muni court, so there's no handicap parking directly in front of or to the side of muni court building.
Really?
Yeah.
And I think they have to have one handicap spot for every 20 normal spots they have. His compliance?
Yeah, they had said, it's another thing that we were talking about on public comment with the council last week, because the city says it's their position that all of the spots against Muni Court on the west and the north should be all designated law enforcement, and it's a security risk to have the public parked there. But they allow a taco truck there in front of the building one day on every Thursday, which is permitted, but the taco truck parks there.
Which would have propane tanks and other things to cook hot food.
They're worried about another, Oklahoma City bombing. So I had proposed across First Street, on the other side, there's plenty of spots open, and there's 4 spots to the north across Clark to be designated for handicap.
How did this issue come to your radar? And I'll tell you the reason I ask. It's a very important issue. Mm-hmm. When my mother-in-law had MS, handicap parking is a serious issue. Mm-hmm. I think some people may cheat and quickly run into court or quickly run into a building and there's nothing around and they use handicap, which they shouldn't. We never had a problem with it. We could always find parking, and she was in a wheelchair. So we actually had a van with a ramp that would come out. And sometimes it actually was easier for us to avoid a handicap spot to kind of get a little further away when there was no cars. It just made the entrance and exit from that particular vehicle. It was a minivan that aftermarket had a ramp installed in it, just a little bit easier. But it's interesting. How did that issue just come to your opinion, your attention?
Steve went down in front of the court building, got in a wheelchair, and went to the nearest handicap parking, which is in the back of the city garage.
15 minutes?
15 minutes, 0.3 miles away. And it took that, imagine that in the summertime at 115 degrees, but he's been requesting that for over a year and a half, and they haven't.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah, but every other court building, if you go to Family Court, you go to City of Henderson, parking. City of North Las Vegas, the RJC, the Supreme Court, even downtown, all of them have direct access for parking very close, except Muni Court. So that's something that you would.
I will bring it up if
they're worried about a vehicle situation. They can just put those poles there in the front that get smashed through.
Well, they're worried about the parking right up against.
That's what I'm saying. Put poles there, and you don't have to worry about a vehicle, getting too deep. You're far enough away. I mean, you're what, 25, 35 feet away?
Yeah.
Plus the steps, so they can counter that way.
Well, I'll follow up with Steve and ask him what he thinks, and I'll have him show me what it is.
Mm-hmm. So you have lots of notes. What notes do you?
I do. I take a lot of notes when I listen to podcasts.
Uh-huh.
And you saw I had a ton of notes earlier. I just love to, when I read the paper, if I have something, I'll write it down or listen to podcasts. I walk a lot at night after dinner. I'll put in a podcast and I'll listen to it. That's really interesting. I didn't know that. Listen to some really good housing podcasts lately. That's been my latest kick. Mm-hmm. Because I do think it's such a salient issue for so many people here in Nevada. The cost of housing is eating up so many people's paychecks.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen an enormous number of private equity firms buy up the housing stock. And I know you talked earlier about building these 4 and 5 bedroom homes, which is phenomenal. I'm all for it. But we need entry-level homes. Mm-hmm. And we need young kids to buy homes. We also need smaller homes for folks who can downsize. And the problem you've got right now, and I'm sure you've read plenty of articles, listened to plenty of articles, seen plenty of articles on television, because of interest rates, people now are very land rich, cash poor, even in cities like Las Vegas, and they do not want to leave their house and trade it in for something smaller with a much higher interest rate, because their mortgage payment stays the same. And it is an issue. The Fed signaled last year, prior to the election, that they were going to probably raise interest rates 2 times this year. And if they do raise interest rates twice, a developer is going to have to go back and get his financing redone. Mm-hmm. That's a huge issue. is getting things to market, getting things built. And again, when you need 100,000 units, you need all types of housing, all across the city. All across the city. Connecticut, I like to use Connecticut. I've also learned when you run for office and you criticize your own neighborhood, people get very upset very quickly.
They get a little offended, yeah.
So I've noticed if you use examples from neighboring jurisdictions to illustrate your point, it's much more palatable for people. So in the state of Connecticut, they have an very interesting thing. In 1989, there was no state income tax in Connecticut. Lowell Weicker was the governor. He signed the law allowing a state income tax. One of the other problems they had is a recession at that point in time. One of the problems they had with the recession was also housing. People could not move in when the companies started to grow. Connecticut is the second worst in housing manufacturing this century. They've only had 11% of their stock has been built since this century. As a result, people are not moving into Connecticut until COVID happened. And when people left New York after COVID and started working remotely, the housing stock in Connecticut was quickly eaten up. So Connecticut, back in the 80s and 90s, there were some blue ribbon panels. They had an 830 bill. And it says if 30% of your available housing stock is not deemed affordable, a builder can bypass city council, there's no county government in Connecticut, and they can demand that things get built. It's very interesting. It allows a developer to go in and fight the NIMBY, the Not in My Backyard group, and get housing built. Now, we don't have anything equivalent. And I do think the Mayor Shelley Berkeley, is going to address this issue. I do. I voted for her. I think she's phenomenal. I think she is going to make this a big issue. Nobody can pick up the phone like Shelley can. Her Rolodex is deeper than everybody's, and get the federal on and pick up the phone and call the governor and pick up the phone and call city council people and county commission people. So I do think this issue is going to be addressed. I do think the Badlands resolution is going to allow for a lot more housing to be built in that area. And I do think you need, like, for example, let's look at Boca Park. There's no reason why Boca Park couldn't have apartment complexes above all of those commercial entities for young kids to live in and go out in, and even folks who are a little older who want to live in that area.
Well, what about I've noticed looking in for a house when we did right before COVID, they wanted $2,700 a month. Now apartments are like $2,200 a month. There's only a $500 difference now. So it's more like you can't even save up enough money to get into the house because the apartment is raking you over the coals before you can start putting that money aside to start getting a lower rate here or there, so that when you do go, you don't get such a high mortgage rate.
So that's functionally a problem of supply. We do not have enough supply for demand. And
I don't know. A lot of apartment complexes aren't even operating at 80% capacity.
That would be news to me. When I was living in an apartment probably 6 years ago, it was always full.
Well, they turn over a lot, but I think the one I live in is only at 90%. The other one is at 70. Their sister property is at 65. Another one's at 80. So they're not full, but yet they're still every year. We need another 120 a month. We need another 200 a month. And instead of keeping it reasonable, you know what I mean, in a normal range, they jack it up, and then housing jacks up, and everybody stays in this little frame where you can almost get your keys to your house, but you also can't.
Yeah.
It's a big problem.
Yeah, it's gone up a lot.
What can we do about that?
I think, again, it comes down to supply. I honestly think this is a supply problem. We need more density. We need taller buildings. We need the federal government to release property so that we can build. We need to work with developers to get projects brought to market faster.
So you're wanting to cut out some red tape too, then?
Absolutely.
And what about the water that has to go with all of that building?
I think if you get rid of, I can tell you, in my own personal house, I'm pretty proud of this. I'm the second owner. I live here in Summerlin. 1,600 square foot house. It's all I need. I think a lot of Americans build houses and end up with multiple rooms they do not need.
Mm-hmm.
And having been a firefighter for 25 years, I can tell you that as you get older, you're not going to want to go up and down the stairs. You're going to sit in your main room. You're going to have dinner with your wife. Your kids are going to come back and visit every once in a while. You need much less than the massive McMansions
Mm-hmm.
that are often built that Americans think is the dream home. I've also lost a lot of hearing as a result of being a firefighter, as a result of all the sirens and all the machinery we use and we're around all the time. A smaller house means I can communicate with you much easier.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't even own a television either.
Oh my goodness.
Everybody says that. There's no TV on in the background.
Wow.
It makes conversation so much more polite.
It's great. You don't listen to the news.
I read it a lot.
You read. Okay.
I read it a lot.
Do you believe what you're reading?
You have to read a
Depends
lot
on what he's reading.
You have to read
What
a lot of
outlet
different
it is.
stuff. I will also say this. I am blessed. When you work at the firehouse, you live with guys, much like you do in the military. And you are forced to interact with people who don't think like you,
Mm-hmm.
who don't have the same perspective you have. And you're forced around the kitchen table, breakfast table, lunch, when you're just in the weight room working out, when you're coming back from calls, to talk about various issues. And you learn to get along with folks. That is lost. It's certainly lost in a lot of political sectors in America, where people are just constantly.
Yeah.
So back to the water issue, though. How are you solving this?
So
Because
My
my
house
weird
here-
thing is we're building water parks, we're building golf courses.
I don't know if
and we're
we've built
telling
any
people
golf
all the we're
courses
telling people all
recently.
the time, you can only water your lawn, 1 day a week for a half hour.
So I don't know if we've built any new golf courses in the past several years. We certainly haven't built any in Ward 2. We've actually taken one off, and I know that TPC Summerlin just did an enormous amount of remediation on their course and put in a lot of desert landscaping. Let me land the plane with my own house. When I moved in, bushes everywhere. We took everything out. We left 3 trees, one in the back, a small one that's grown, and one in the front corner. Took out every single bush. Put in a new decking. Patricia Farley, former state senator, it was her company. Did all new Cool Creek decking. Put in pebbles myself. Put in 4 cactus as you walk in through a little back gate next to my house. The front door to my house is actually on the side of the house. And then there's about half a dozen cactus right here. And then on a fence line, there's maybe another 5 to 6 cactus right down there.
So you think more people need to do the desert landscape?
I do. I think it's
rid
phenomenal.
of that.
Even,
Yeah.
growing up in Connecticut where everything's green.
Yeah.
I had a captain of mine came out to visit. His son was looking at Coast Guard. So he ended up staying with my dad and I in my dad's house. And he woke up the next morning. He arrived late at night. And he wakes up in the morning and he sees this backyard with trees and there's a pond in the back. And he looks at me and he says, "What is your water bill here for your parents' house?" And I was like, "What? We don't have a water bill here. And
Mm-hmm.
there's not sprinklers. It's just rain."
Mm-hmm. It comes from the sky.
Yeah, and he had not seen
What
that.
we don't have here.
God-given water bill.
Right.
Yeah, he had not seen that. I do think the desert landscaping, it's cleaner. It's phenomenal. I actually really enjoy it. I don't have to mow the lawn.
Mm-hmm.
That's enjoyable for me. That's a couple hours I get to spend with my wife.
Yeah, it's good.
And I'm not doing yard work. I really enjoy it.
I will say one thing about yard work, as somebody who does it, and I cut down trees, and I see people with dead trees in their yards all the time. If you're building your house and you're putting a pool in there, do not put trees in your backyard with your pool. I don't care what they tell you or how pretty it is. Don't do it. If you got a pool in the backyard, leave it flat, leave it no landscape, put your trees in the front. The trees are going to find the pool. They're going to crack it. Something's going to happen. Or if not, they're going to do something. They're going to die, and all the stuff's going to fall into the pool. It's going to ruin your pump. Don't do it. For the love of God, don't do it. Desert landscape if there's a pool.
Desert landscape is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the Southern Nevada Water Authority is still offering rebates.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to get my front yard cleared out. That's my next project for this year.
Well, we are running out of time. So to close this out, I want you to, Mark is going to zoom in on you.
Okay.
So people always want to know why you're running, what makes you qualified, and what are you going to do for the people of Ward 2?
My name is Luke McCarthy. Go ahead.
And
Sorry.
where they can find you, your website.
Yeah, all your contact info.
Well, my phone number, easiest way to get in touch with me.
Sure.
That's the way to get in touch with me.
Sure. You can give it out.
Do it.
My name is Luke McCarthy, and my phone number is 702-601-8700. And if my voicemail is full, send me a text message. 702-601-8700. That is the best way to get in touch with me. And I think elected officials should be accessible to the people that they serve. Why am I running? I will tell you why I'm running. I am fed up running fentanyl overdoses. I am fed up running on homeless people, homeless vets. I am fed up on running people with, there's a kind of a triangle of drug addiction, mental health, and homelessness. And layered in is medical debt, and layered in is a supply problem. We need more housing. And if elected, that will be my number one focus, is to work with the mayor to get developers to move into Las Vegas to build housing so that our children can move back here when they graduate from college. They can afford a house. They can meet people their own age. They can marry, and I can have grandkids. And I mean that sincerely. Mm-hmm. That is the reason. My new wife and I are not going to have any kids. We tried. We were unsuccessful. And I told my youngest daughter, who's in high school, you're not going to get a little sibling. And she said, well, your whole world just opened up. What are you going to do? And I said, well, what do you think I should do? And it kind of brings a tear to my eye. I'm serious when I said it. She said, you should run for office. You've been in politics on the endorsement side. You need to put yourself out there, help the brothers and sisters you work with, help the city workers, help the people in SEIU, help the people in culinary, get them housing, because we've got the jobs. We don't have housing for these folks. And that's the issue.
That's great. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you
appreciate
both
it.
very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Frank, for filling in.
Anytime.
Steve, we'll do this again when you're more available.
We missed you. He's okay, everybody. Don't worry.
He's all right.
He's good. But thanks for joining us, everybody. We will see you next time on the Veterans in Politics Talk Show.
Thank you.